Welcome back to The Takeout. Let's bring in our political panel, Matt Gorman and CBS News contributor Joel Payne. Joel is a Democratic strategist and Matt is a Republican strategist. We're also joined by our own Robert Costa. And Robert, I want to start with you because you've got some breaking news. You just spoke to the President of the United States specifically about Venezuela. What did he tell you?
It's good to be with you. I spoke to President Trump today about the issue of Venezuela, and in our conversation, he began by talking about the attack, and he believes it will have real reverberations across the world in terms of setting the tone for his foreign policy, in the sense that he's willing to use executive power to take dramatic action. And he said it really will have, in his view, a cascading effect in terms of how people see the United States, how people process his own presidency. And I said, well, when you look at what you did, there's talk of this revival of the Monroe Doctrine, of American might and power in the hemisphere, and of America really taking many bigger steps to try to exert itself in the region. And I said, do you see yourself as following some kind of ideological framework, a so-called Trump doctrine? And it was notable to me that in our conversation, the president pushed back against any characterization that he is following a so-called doctrine. He said instead what he's doing is reacting to the drug trade. He said, quote, if there's any doctrine, it is really about me stopping drugs coming into this country. If you're bringing drugs into the United States, then you're against what the United States is for. And this is a classic example of how President Trump operates on both domestic and foreign policy. As much as so many people around him, allies and critics, want to define him as nationalist or populist or say he's the reincarnation of President Monroe, he is someone who, when it comes to negotiations, politically and diplomatically, wants to have much more room to maneuver. So you see in his interactions with heads of state, whether it's the head of Colombia or in his warnings to the Cuban leaders, there's strong language, but there's also a possibility that he could change his posture. And that makes him hard to track ideologically, and he revealed that in our conversation.
Right. He's definitely keeping the entire world guessing, especially when it comes to what he's been saying about Greenland. Matt, I want to ask you about this because the president was not happy when 5 Senate Republicans voted today to basically try to constrain his power to strike again in Venezuela. These are Republicans who held off before. Now they are jumping on board. He lashed out at them. He said that they should be replaced and that they were stupid. That doesn't come as a surprise, I'm sure. So why were they willing to buck him?
Well, I think a couple things. I don't think he cares at all about the Monroe Doctrine. You think you're right. The drugs are part of it. I think it's also China and Russia. I think that was the geopolitical play there. They're willing to buck him, I think, for several reasons. Some of them are Lisa Murkowski and Todd Young, who's retiring. The one I took note of was Susan Collins. And I think everybody was done favors by that criticism. Certainly Susan Collins has an in-kind contribution to her campaign, the deep blue state of Maine. But also one of the most notable things, but to your point, Robert, that I took away from his press conference, but also what you were talking about just now, is it's all a big deal, he said, in terms of like transactions. So he might be mad at Susan Collins and Josh Hawley now. The next vote comes, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. I want to turn to the other big story of the day, which is Minnesota, and ask you all about the administration's strategy here. They are coming out swinging at this woman who was killed yesterday. They've called her a domestic terrorist. They have said she's a left-wing radical. President Trump called her a professional agitator. This investigation is 24 hours old. I don't think we have an indication yet that any of those things are true. Why are they going after her without waiting to see what the investigation says, Joel?
It's a good question. I'm probably not the best person to ask to translate what's going on in the Trump White House. It does seem, and this is a part of that conversation that you and Matt and Bob were just having, strength feels like a thing that Donald Trump wants to show off. He wants to show it off internationally. He wants to show it off domestically. I think the other side of that for him is that this is not what people asked for. People did not ask for protesters who are peacefully protesting in their community to be fired upon. This is a woman who, by all intents and purposes, it seems like she was dropping off or picking up her child from somewhere in the Minneapolis area. When you talk about Venezuela, it's wholly inconsistent, the actions that he took. Again, not what people sent him to Washington to do. So it's interesting that Donald Trump and his allies have defined the purpose of his presidency this way. That is not what the American people who sent him to Washington, that's not what they wanted him to do. And that's what the big disruption is for me.
It does seem, Matt, like focusing so heavily on this woman is a way to try to draw attention away from another debate about the wisdom of sending so many ICE officers into one city all at once.
The way I took it was they were not going to let this story be defined by whether it was Democrats or any of the media. Thank God there was camera footage where people saw that this woman looked like went after the officer, was already interfering with law enforcement procedure, tried to go after him by hitting the gas. And it was a terrible situation. It was awful all around. But I think they were not going to let the narrative be overwhelmed without going in first. I think that in many ways, they learned many of these lessons from the first Trump presidency to go on offense, to show that strength, rather than let it envelop them.
I think Republicans and Donald Trump risk the American people thinking they're gaslighting them. And I respect Matt a lot. If anyone can watch that video and think that that woman deserved lethal force to be shot in the face, all of us have been involved in picking up and dropping off a child or been involved in protest. There is absolutely no justification for it. But more importantly, it doesn't matter actually what Matt or myself thinks. What do the American people who are watching think? What he's doing in Venezuela is not aging well. It's not starting off well. It's actually starting off worse than other similar situations internationally has in recent history. And I actually think that what he's doing domestically with going after people in their communities based on this immigration rage strategy they have, that's also not going well. And it matters what the American people think, and it's not aging well right now.
With the little time we have left, Robert, it is the Trump playbook to come out swinging and deal with any potential fallout later.
If you step back, what we're also seeing here is the implementation of what President Trump has been doing since day one of this term. There's been a use of executive power and a use of federal forces in American towns and cities. And so what makes this incident notable beyond the specifics of what unfolded on the street, it's not just a police incident in a town where there's maybe a question about the police action in a community or a respective city. This is the federal government through ICE, through federal forces from different agencies having this presence. And so it raises bigger questions about the broader policy of the administration. And it's not just a policing matter, it's a federal question. And as you've seen in the reaction, many Republicans support President Trump having these federal forces in American cities to implement the immigration policy. And many people are alarmed. And there's the ongoing reckoning from incident after incident.
Robert Costa, Matt Gorman, Joel Payne, thank you all so much. A really important discussion. Appreciate